Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to what I guess is the inaugural. We've had a lot of Hoosier Huddle podcasts in the past, but one of the exciting parts to start that we've had with this change over to rivals was we were able to also add on some of the other Indiana sports. It's been about a month since we first jumped over to rivals, and I know when we first started, the roster was basically nothing, and we pretty much just knew that we had a new coach, but a lot of changes. So we wanted to hop on, kind of talk through some of these changes, see what we're excited for, talk about some of the incoming, outgoing players, lots of updates that we've had in the last about month or so. So joined alongside with me, I am Nate Comp. This is TJ Inman. TJ, how you doing?
Doing great. Yeah, excited to talk about basketball. Something very different than what I usually say, but we've done a lot of work on the rivals side of things for basketball, and I know you and I have both uh, been IU basketball fans for a very long time, so it's just kind of a hey, yeah, we're covering it now, but we've been paying attention to it for a very long time. So it's not a whole lot of adjustment there. But you're right, a ton of change over the past 1 month to 45 days. Darian DeVries and his coaching staff doing a lot of work.
Yeah, for sure. I know the very first article I wrote when we went over to Rivals was a men's basketball new era primer. And at that point, basically, I was like, we have a coach, and I know that he has plans of adding other stuff, and I don't know necessarily what that other stuff is going to be. But now and it looked like on April 2nd, and then a flurry of them all the way up through April 29th. So let's just start. Let's kind of break down this roster a little bit.
Mhm.
TJ, what do you think? Do you have a favorite addition that we've added through the portal so far?
I think we forget how good of a player Tucker DeVries is. It's just kind of taken for granted that Tucker DeVries coming with his dad, that gets forgotten. He's a ton of fun to watch. So that's an obvious choice. Lamar Wilkerson, of course, another obvious choice, just because we've been starved for 3-point shooting, and he's a sharpshooter that IU has not had for quite a long time. But my favorite guy to watch, just in diving into the research and the amount of college basketball that I watch in the offseason, my favorite guy to watch has been Tatum Connerway, who looks like he's probably going to start at point guard. We can't say, oh, he's going to be the starting point guard. Practice is going to determine that. But um, on paper, he looks like he will be one of the starting guards for Indiana this coming season. Um, I think Connerway does a lot of things for this roster. One, elite defender. He's
For
going
sure.
to be able to guard the other team's best perimeter player. He has good size, 6'3". He's strong, big frame. And I think that's going to be something that IU sorely needs is a player that can really lock down on the perimeter. One of the best steal rates in the country. So prolific in taking the ball away, which I think also could be really important for this team, given the lack of rim protection that it seems like Indiana has. That's an issue that we'll talk about later this episode here. But given that, I think that on ball pressure is going to take on an important role because one of the best ways to prevent getting killed in the post is to prevent good post entry passes. And I think
Yeah.
that that's the way that IU is going to have to go. Um, in addition, I think Connerway really good at attacking off the dribble and a really high assist rate. He shares the ball really well, sets his teammates up, and with the shooters that IU can put around him, I think he could be in for a really big year. He's just a mature lead guard that IU, I think, sorely needed given the other pieces that are around him. So if I had to pick one, obviously there's a ton of choices, but I'm going to go with Tatum Connerway as my guy that I'm going to plant the flag on as being better than expected.
Yeah, I mean, there's essentially an entire roster full of
Yeah,
choices when you when you look through it.
right.
But yeah, I think that's huge. I think the defensive part is a very big thing, and you mentioned the kind of the lack of bigs that we see on this roster right now. Obviously, that's if we were doing this podcast a year ago, it would be the exact opposite, or really any of the Mike Woodson era was so focused on, okay, let's start from the inside and kind of build our way out from there. It's been entirely the opposite so far in building this roster under DeVries. It's definitely been. I don't think he's ever seen a guard that he hasn't liked. It seems like so. A very welcome change. I think it's especially for me. I think definitely from the rest of the Indiana basketball fanhood too. We've been clamoring for this kind of roster for a while, and yeah, I think a big piece that you brought up Connorway's defense. In the past, Woodson has always needed kind of that big down the middle that can block shots and kind
Mm.
of, if someone is getting past on the perimeter, there's still that intimidating presence inside that you can still lock down defensively. I think Connorway's ability to lock down on the perimeter maybe makes that need a little bit less. And we've also just had, it seems like we've got so many guys that have position versatility and can kind of guard multiple spots.
Yeah.
I'm really liking how this roster is coming together.
Yep. Positional versatility is a good point. Um, I know that Darian DeVries technically runs the pack line on defense, and
Yeah.
that tends to give Indiana fans PTSD with just a mention of pack line. Um, that's fair. However, I also think it's fair to point out that there's a lot of different ways to run the pack line, and the way that Archie Miller coached it versus the way that Darian DeVries coaches it are very different. It's I do not feel like they are comparable in the way that they set out. Darian DeVries has an emphasis on taking away open 3-point looks. He is not going to drop down below the 3-point line, go under every screen, and allow open shooters. Darian DeVries, his pack line extends out the defense on the perimeter beyond that 3-point line and attempts to pressure the ball around the perimeter. Now, one issue that I can see becoming a problem for Indiana this year is if you extend out that defense with guys that are not good on ball defenders, if the system is not sound and you don't have a rim protector, I could see getting beat off the dribble becoming a problem for Indiana with teams attacking off the dribble guys like Lamar Wilkerson, who is not the best on ball defender. Um, Guys like uh, Tucker DeVries,
Yeah, Tucker
if
DeVries
he's
side to
asked,
side for sure.
yeah. So if teams attack off the dribble and Indiana is not good at helping and not good on defensive rotation, that could lead to a lot of open looks at the rim for the opponent because the major just kind of flashing red light that you see with the roster, this is not great analysis here. It's obvious to everybody. There is not a true center on this team. Reed
Yeah.
Bailey's 6'10, but he is not a good defender. Uh, at least historically, he has not been. That does not mean he can't improve. It does not mean that he can't be better than what he was, but he's not going to turn into an elite defensive center. It's not going to happen. That's not his game, and that's not what he should be asked to do. Sam Alexis, good defender, uh, transfer from Florida,
Florida.
previously had played at Chattanooga. Um, I think he's going to play a key role just in his bulk. He's 245, 250, something like that. Big, strong, 6'9", physical presence that can also protect the rim. But you need more than that. So I think it could become an issue of extending out that pressure and getting beat off the dribble and guys just blowing by for layups at the rim. Now, one thing that I think you'll see a lot better than what IU fans have been used to under Mike Woodson, you are not going to see a bunch of overhelping to where the defender gets beat off the dribble and the other wing defender, other perimeter defender helps off of his man
To
and
give
leaves
up
a
an open
wide open
three.
kick out for a three. That's not going to happen. Um, I do think that this system, one, is going to switch on a lot of pick and rolls. You see action of picks off the ball. You're going to see a lot of switching. Typically or traditionally, Darian DeVries has not done a bunch of switching on defense, but he has not had a roster that has had the positional versatility that this roster has.
Yeah.
And yes, it's a small roster in on the interior, but if you're looking at the height and kind of the weight of some of these guys that are going to be a part of 8-man rotation, probably 8 to 9 man rotation, Indiana's actually pretty big on the perimeter and on the wing. They've got a lot of guys that are between that 6'3" to 6'7" range with some good length because it's not just about your height, right? It's about your wingspan. Basketball is not played with your head; it's
Yeah.
played with your arms. That's how you defend. Um, and Indiana's got some guys that I think can improve defensively. Josiah Miles, Nick Dorn, um, guys that have good length that I think can switch from the 1 through the 4. The one matchup that I think Indiana is going to have to figure out some answers for will be teams that have one or two traditional bigs that are going to feast in the post. Um,
Yeah. And
you're
that's,
thinking of Michigan, Purdue. Yeah.
you kind of picture those bigs, but I think that can also, if we switch it to the other end of the court, that could also be something that will be tough to defend for other teams of, yeah, maybe you also then you have to go to the other side of the court. And if you've got a 7-1 big man that can't move that well, suddenly he's going to have to guard us on all areas of the floor offensively. And a big priority is, it seems like on this DeVries roster so far, has been the ability to shoot from three, which would be a welcome change. And I I really think this team will be tough to defend on the other side of the floor.
Yeah, the perimeter shooting, uh, obviously, it's a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
A major emphasis on that. I did a quick kind of math makeup as this roster was being constructed. This was before the final addition of Josh Harris, who not a perimeter shooter, so it didn't change the numbers much. But going through just last season, the amount of makes per game, and I won't rattle off the numbers, but in total, Indiana was at 16.2 made threes per game. So 16.2 out of 43. And that's just taking the makes that they had last season, the attempts that those guys had last season per game, 37.7% from three. Now, for context, North Florida led the country with 12.8 made threes per game. Indiana would be at 16.2 per game.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're not going to make 16.2 made threes per game. A lot of these guys are stepping in to much different usage scenarios than they were in at their previous schools. Jason Drake is not going to get the same number of shots he did at Drexel. And Nick Dorn is not going to get the same number of shots he did at Elon. But still, it's a clear emphasis on these guys produced at a lower level. They did something at a pretty high volume in each case, shooting threes and making them at a pretty good clip.
Yeah.
And they were brought to Indiana to fill a different role in terms of usage, but a lot of these players were brought here because they are good 3-point shooters at volume. Another trend that we have seen, guys that were brought in that have good assist rates, players that are good at sharing the ball, setting their teammates up, and the ball doesn't stick in their hands on offense. Um, I think that was a fair criticism of Mike Woodson's offensive system. A lot of the ball sticking in a player's hand, whether it was throwing it down to the post for a 10 or 15-second post-up opportunity, or kind of ISO ball on the perimeter with somebody like Miles Rice, who was taking 15, 20 seconds off the shot clock before IU even got into an action.
Yeah.
This roster appears to be constructed with guys that share the ball and can make the three. And if you put those two together, spread players around the perimeter, have guys that can attack off the dribble and know how to pass it out while they're on the move, that's a pretty good recipe for putting up a lot of three-pointers, and that's going to be clearly the emphasis. And you can imagine, if IU gets hot at home in a packed assembly hall and starts putting in threes with a roster of guys that know how to do it, you can imagine how that can get rolling and be really tough to stop.
Yeah, I've missed those assembly hall roars of just the big momentum changing three. It goes into a timeout, the media timeout. You can hear the band roar, and they show the student section going crazy. Like, yeah, that has been missing. It feels like for a while. Maybe we've had the dunk or whatever that's done it, but there's just something so staggering about hitting that open three and just really kind of, changing the momentum of a game. I think when you were talking there, a big thing that came to my mind there, I know our history is obviously in the football world with the podcasting. It's the production over potential. It's
Right. Yeah.
the portal, but it is guys that not that you just think they can grow into being this type of player. It's a player, even if they're doing it at a lower level, they have shown they can produce in that way. And it's a pretty mature roster if you mean just the one freshman. So you've got guys that have experience doing it in a pretty big level. So I know one of DeVries' quotes in his opening presser was something along the lines of you're not just building a collection of players, you're building a team. That was a big thing that it felt like in some of the past portal classes we've had for IU basketball. It's just kind of been like, who's in the top 15 and can we pay them enough to come here? And then clearly we'll be good because we have a lot of talent amassed. But I don't think that necessarily was working. Obviously, the former regime has now gone because of that. So I do think this roster is built in a way that at least gives me more hope that you're getting guys that can click together, that have assets that really click. It should be an exciting team. I did want to bring up, though, it seems like we've kind of danced around two things. So you can take it in either way. I think we're going to hit on both of them. But one is it does feel like we have a hole with a big man. So if you wanted to touch on that. And then we also know that two potential guys that now it's up to two potential guys that we could see adding to this roster are Luke Goody, who was on last year's roster, is applying for a waiver. That one we've known about since I think very end of the season. I think we were still playing, and he had kind of announced that, yeah, I'm going to be doing this. And then the one that we just got this past week or so was Anthony Leal is also applying for a waiver for that fifth year. So I guess the broad question is just thoughts on potential roster adds, whether it be guys that we've seen on this roster before or guys that we think could fill one of the big man roles.
Yeah. So Indiana definitely showed some interest. We're not sure how serious that interest was, but definitely showed some interest in Federico, who is rim protecting big man, not an offensive threat, but he would have filled that role of being able to block some shots, be a lob threat on pick and rolls, and get some rebounds and be just a presence for you in the middle. The rumor is that his NIL ask was 1.5, $2 million, something like that. That's not something that IU was apparently interested in paying. He commits to believe Texas A&M.
Yeah, I think it's A&M with McBacco now, right?
Yes, playing
yeah.
for Bucky McMillan, their new coach, after Buzz Williams left for Maryland. The other player that kind of in that similar scenario, more of an offensive game than Federico, uh, kind of tantalizing potential, but the production hasn't exactly, you know, he's kind of failed to impress a little bit. Baba Miller um, was at Florida State, transferred to Florida Atlantic, had a fine season. Again, potential certainly there for him to be a major addition, and he's again asking for a lot in NIL. He's still out there. It appears that teams are willing to wait that out and see if that asking price comes down. Maybe he becomes an option for Indiana again. Other than that, we really haven't heard Indiana linked with anybody um, outside of, as you mentioned, Luke Goody and Anthony Leal. Uh, I think the most likely scenario at this point is that Indiana holds those two roster spots open. Um, if those two waivers are approved, those two guys will be scholarships 12 and 13.
I was
Luke
gonna ask. So
Goody,
you think? I think Goody feels like a lock. It feels like it basically was the only player that
yeah,
was left over from this team that DeVries had said like, yeah, if you want to come back, you can. Leo is the newer one, so I think there's less rumors in general. And
yeah,
I know he's at times been kind of a controversial player, I guess, with the
right.
Hoosier fan base. But do you think he's welcomed back?
So it would be I think that there's a tricky off the court situation there for Darian DeVries. You have a former Mr. Basketball.
Yep,
I shouldn't
a
say
Bloomington
former.
South guy.
He was named Mr. Basketball. He's a Bloomington native from Bloomington South. If he makes it public, which he did not enter the transfer portal. If he gets granted that eligibility, the only place he can play is Indiana. He cannot transfer. He did not enter the portal. Um, so that's a pretty public declaration of, hey, I'm going for this waiver. I'm not in the portal. I want to play for IU again. And if
Hmm.
you have Anthony Leal granted another year of eligibility, you have an open scholarship, and you are a new coach and tell him, nah, don't want you. I could see that being problematic, whether
Yeah,
that's fair
it's a
or
tough look
not.
in your first
Yeah,
100 days or whatever. Yeah.
yes, whether that's fair or not, that's not for me to comment on it, and whether it's fair or not also doesn't matter,
Yeah.
um, because the perception of it. I mean, think of the headline there. It's a pretty easy way to burn some bridges. Um, so I think that if those two are granted, they would be scholarships 12 and 13. Um, I do not see any reason why Anthony Leal should be given another year
Yeah,
other
I
than
was in the same boat as
other
other.
than hey, the rules don't matter anymore. We got nothing. Go whatever. Go
Yep.
play. We don't have any enforcement power anymore, and now we know it. And sure, whatever.
Yep.
That would obviously open the door for a ton more
Yeah, that
movements.
it really kind of changed.
Uh,
I mean, he could be setting a precedent, it would think.
yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, it's
I
crazy.
have I have not been given any indication that it's expected that he will get that waiver. I would put it at a very low percentage. Luke Goody, I think, is much closer to 50-50. Um, I don't know if Anthony Leal is willing, if it gets denied, I don't know if he's willing to try and fight that in court. I don't know. Um, again, I don't know what case he has. Luke Goody actually does have a little bit of a hey, there's this rule in place, but it doesn't really make sense in terms of he played the number of games where he would be getting another year. However, he came back at the end of a season. So he missed the
Yeah.
first part of the season, the first two thirds, and came back for the final third to try and help his team.
And his argument is nice in that it kind of appeals to the morals of like, Yeah, I
Yes.
mean, I could have sat out the rest of the season. My team is gone for the first 20 plus games without me, but
Yeah.
I came back because I wanted to help my team, and that, I mean, that's the kind of player that he is, and I also think it's a pretty good case.
Yeah. And I will give a, what I think of Brad Underwood's irrelevant, but good on Brad Underwood for going to bat for Luke Goody with the NCAA. He uh, went to the NCAA and made appeals, not the correct word, but made it clear to them like, hey, this guy is in this for all the right reasons. He's a example of who you want participating. This is the type of kid you want to reward. Here's why he should get another year. That's something that's going to help a Big Ten rival of Brad Underwood's, but him and Luke Goody have had a really good relationship, and um, he took it upon himself to do that, and I think that was pretty cool of Brad Underwood to do. Now, again, I'm saying I do not expect Anthony Leal to get another year. Ultimately, I do think Luke Goody will. It might take a legal fight, but it seems like when things go to court, the NCAA just ends up.
Kind of gives up. Yeah.
Yeah. So um, I would I would guess Luke Goody gets another year. He's guy number 12. So you've got an open scholarship. Um, I would anticipate that would go to a younger player with multiple years of eligibility that they would not be counting on to do much, if anything, this coming season and develop him. And just based on the roster breakdown, it's probably going to be a big guy.
Yeah.
That maybe it's just, hey, he's raw, but he's got size. He has an athleticism. Maybe he's a good rim protector currently, but he does nothing else. And you just try and develop it and take it a flyer on him as your 13th guy as a development player. So I think that's the most likely scenario. It does not seem likely that there is a major impact big guy that emerges as an option for IU. So it looks
Yeah.
like in terms of your big man rotation, you're looking at Reed Bailey, Sam Alexis, and Josh Harris as your big guys.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's back to that position versatility and
yep.
adding Goody in. That's another guy that about 6'7" or so. Again,
Yeah. Yeah.
tying back to what we started this conversation with, a guy that can nail a three, can stretch the floor. Another one that I would add to the list of concerns of on-ball perimeter defense. That
Yes.
definitely at times he was a guy that struggled to stay in front of the man he was guarding, but
Yep.
put in maximum effort. Definitely, I think from last year's team was one of my favorite players. So would be
Mhm.
a welcome addition. And then I guess to put a bow on the Leo talk too. That's the positive. I think would be he's kind of the opposite if you're talking on ball perimeter. I think he'd actually be a
Yeah.
welcome addition, and
Yeah.
he often was taking the hardest assignment that we had last season, and
Yep.
whether it was a guy that was 6 inches taller than him or the same height or whatever, he was glad to take that and had some clutch defensive plays down the stretch last season.
Yeah. I know that Anthony Leal, and I think a lot of the animosity is probably too strong, but I think a lot of the kind of eye rolling from some of the IU fan base goes back to his senior day round one. I
Yeah.
guess if he came back, he'd be going through senior day number 3, which is
Crazy.
kind of ridiculous. But his chill comment,
Yeah.
I think that rubbed a lot of people that are longtime IU fans the wrong way, to be kind of told how to feel by uh, a college young man.
Yeah.
And
And it was probably a lot
you know,
directed at Woodson, and he
I
just
think
kind of
so.
one of those guys. So yeah,
Yep.
it definitely was part of it.
Yeah. But on the court, you're right. He would actually fill a role that could be used as an
Mhm.
extra kind of. He's not big, but he is fairly strong as an on-ball defender, and he caused a lot of teams some issues later in the season with the way that he was able to defend on the ball. And I think it's fair to say that Indiana's performance overall did improve when Anthony Leal got increased minutes. Um,
Yeah.
Are the two things directly related? Maybe, maybe not. But his advanced metrics numbers were among the better ones on last year's team, particularly as a defensive player. So I think that he would actually have a role to fill on this team. I think in an ideal world, you'd be filling it with another big guy that was useful. But if those guys aren't out there, then it's either, hey, we'll take a flyer on this young guy that might pan out, or he might transfer out in a year, who knows, or Anthony Leal. So we'll see. But again, neither one of us feel like there's really much standing at all, other than, hey, I want to keep playing basketball.
Yeah, just
Well,
postpone
okay.
the realty for one more year and do senior night round 3, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
we'll
we
see how
want to,
that goes. We're not going to hear anything on that for a little while.
yeah, that's what I
Just
figured.
yeah.
We can put a bow on the roster. I know we had a couple questions in our the forums about the coaching staff, so we could have started there, but we'll move over there. So the additions, we had Nick Norton come over from West Virginia, along with Ryan Horn, the strength conditioning coach. He also comes over, replaces Cliff Marshall. Drew Adams comes over from Cincinnati. Kenny Johnson returns from a couple different stops since he left Indiana, but came from Georgetown. Mike, is it Bargain? Bargain?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
From Bradley, and then the most recent one, which seems like a pretty good get off of the Tennessee staff, was Rod Clark. So, just thoughts on the staff so far. I think there's still some more additions to make, but thoughts on the staff so far.
Yeah. So Garrett Sturtz was another one that seems like he's going to be kind of a analytics guy in the administrative side, coming over again from West Virginia, and he was with them at Drake as well. Nick Norton also with DeVries at Drake and West Virginia. So those are guys that he clearly trusts and feels good with. And Ryan Horn also, as you mentioned. Guys that he trusts, that he knows, that know him, know what he wants in a practice, know what he wants his offense to look like, know what he wants his defense to look like, and can help implement that. Because right now, on the player side, you're looking at Connor Enright, that played for DeVries at Drake before going to DePaul for a year, and then his son Tucker. Beyond that, nobody else has been with him before. So those coaches will be important to help implement stuff. We'll start with the non-recruiting side. Mike Bargan looks like he's going to be like a special assistant to the head coach. A new rule for the NCAA this year: you're not limited to 3 assistants; you are limited to 5 in terms of recruiting and bench assistants. I don't really know the rationale for the changes there, but that's the rule. So, but Bargan is not going to be in one of those 5. He's going to be kind of as a special assistant guy. I think he's going to do a lot of scouting on opponents. He's going to do a lot of game planning, and he's really known as an offensive coach that went to Bradley, and after being the head coach at Butler Community College in Kansas, went there to help Brian Wardle, and the Bradley program really took off. They won back-to-back Missouri Valley titles during the time that Darian DeVries was at Drake, so they saw each other. And I know that Bargan really is considered kind of a whiz on the offensive side of the ball, being able to scheme things quickly, being able to implement offensive systems and tweaks to offensive systems against specific opponents. Finding things that maybe, for instance, he'll be scouting a game. Indiana's playing Wisconsin, and he will see something that Wisconsin is doing on defense that IU's offensive system can make a tweak here or there, put it in for that game, and maybe you get an extra couple possessions that are successful, and that can swing a game. So he'll be kind of that, I would say, more of a developing development coach. Nick Norton, same thing, known as a development guy. Work with players and develop skills. You turn to the recruiting side, and you've got the trio of Drew Adams, Kenny Johnson, and Rod Clark. Strengths for that staff is going to be, for those three, is going to be just the recruiting connections that they have. Drew Adams, local guy from Bloomington, he coached at Bradley as well. It was a staff member for that Bradley team that won back-to-back Missouri Valley titles. Went to Cincinnati. He's been at IU before. He was with Tom Crane in a non-recruiting capacity, kind of a role similar to what Adam Howard had for Mike Woodson before Howard was let go. Interestingly, Adam Howard just got hired
Yeah, just got
at
hired today. I saw that somewhere in Texas, right?
Texas Rio Grande,
Yeah, I think that's right.
something like that. So he'll be right by Mexico, I guess. But anyway, kind of that similar role, sort of a director of basketball ops type thing, is what he had at IU at that time. But a ton of local connections, a ton of Indiana elite connections, which is the premier AAU program in Indiana, one of the best in the Midwest. And he's also got international connections. He's done a lot of international scouting for Bradley and for Cincinnati most recently. Helped them land a top 30 class at Cincinnati. So Drew Adams is one. Kenny Johnson is kind of my favorite hire of this staff. One, he's been in a little bit of trouble with the NCAA.
Yeah, kind of proves maybe we're playing some hardball again. I'm
Exactly.
not opposed to it,
Exactly.
but play along the edges. He's definitely
And I do not view the things that he got in trouble for as some kind of gigantic red flag. I mean, the things that
yeah.
he got in trouble for are perfectly legal now. He was with Rick Pitino at Louisville, and Rick Pitino basically threw a hissy fit about Kenny Johnson telling the truth to NCAA investigators.
Yeah.
And kind of felt like Kenny Johnson was a rat for telling the truth. Well, I don't view that as a black mark against Kenny Johnson. But very good recruiter, a ton of connections, notably on the East Coast, the DMV area. That's where he's from. And he has already proven vital. I mean, a number of connections that Kenny Johnson had helped build this staff. After the staff was built, brought in Rod Clark from Tennessee, known as an up-and-coming coach. He's in his early 30s, coached at the AAU level at a program called MoCan Elite, and then was at the prep school level as well. So he's got connections in that area. And then most recently has been with Tennessee. Rick Barnes hired him and had some really good things to say about him. He helped recruit and develop Zakai Ziegler.
Dalton Connect was in there, I know.
Wilson Chandler, and then Dalton Connect was he was the main recruiter on him. Dalton Connect mentioned that he felt really comfortable with Rod Clark because Rod Clark had played at the junior college level, and they had a connection over playing at the junior college level and how tough that grind was to get to where they were going. For Rod Clark, it was not as a player, but it was working his way up as a coach after being a player in JUCO. And for Dalton Connect, it was playing in JUCO and then going Northern Colorado and then eventually getting to Tennessee. And that, and Dalton Connect mentioned Rod Clark several times as a key reason that he developed into the player that he became at Tennessee. So he's still early in his career, but has a ton of connections at the AAU level, at the prep school level, and he's proven it now in the Southeastern Conference as well. So there's your three recruiters. They do have room to hire another assistant, but it does not appear like they're in any rush to do so. I actually think this will probably be the staff that they have going forward through this next season. I don't think that they're going to fill that final slot.
And if it
Justin
is, I mean,
Bailey,
I think my the roster construction that we've seen is it's guys that seem like they can not only work together well, but they all bring their own unique strengths
yep,
and can kind of attack in many different areas of whether you're improving on the defense, finding those offensive loopholes or strategies that you can kind of take advantage of, and then preparing for the future on the recruiting side. And you're also getting like Rod Clark's a very young guy. You're getting a guy that can kind of sit and develop on the Indiana staff.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to like with this staff. And it's definitely been, I think, a kind of an issue in the past where it felt like even if our assistants were kind of strong, I honestly didn't know enough about them because they never
Mm-hmm.
really had a moment to shine under Woody. It feels like we're all doing this together and we're a strong team
Yeah, I do not feel like
this past season.
yeah, I don't feel like there's going to be concerns about this staff being outworked. It's not a criticism of the previous staff because I do think they were hindered by a coach that just was not particularly interested in high school recruiting at all.
Yeah.
He made it very clear towards the end of his tenure he only wanted guys that could help him win right away.
And I
Because
think it
I
was
think he
clear
was
because his best high school recruiting often came with those
yeah
guys that were decommitting in April or
right
whatever, and he was just scooping them up because you had to do 14 days of work instead of 150. Like,
yes
yeah,
yeah, and I think he was aware that his tenure was looking to be a short term one,
yeah,
um, and he was not interested in building a program. He was interested in win this season and then figure out next season after that.
yep,
And that's in today's portal environment, that's understandable. I do think you're going to see a lot of coaches de-emphasize high school recruiting in favor of the portal, but I think you absolutely have to have a basis on your roster that you're not starting over every year, and that is
hmm
one thing I like about this roster construction. You've got uh, let's see, Jason Drake has 2 years left. Josiah Miles, Nick Dorn, 2 years left. Josh Harris, 3 years. Trent Sisley's a freshman, so 4. So, hey, some of those guys might leave after this year. Who knows? But you do have the potential to have 6 guys in place. Maybe you add another one, and that gives you 7. So you
yeah,
have potential to have half your roster. Maybe you add 2 or 3 high schoolers in next year's class and 2 or 3 portal players that fill holes in your roster as impact guys, and there you go. I think that that's the ideal build. Is that you're looking to the portal for 2 to 3 really big impact pieces, and not having to okay, well, let's go find 8 or 9 guys and start over again. Um,
yes,
so I think that now I don't want to be a Pollyanna guy. We've been accused of that in our football coverage before. I do think there is one concern that I have on the staff. There are no natural connections to the South. Um, no natural connection to, for instance, the state of Georgia.
yep,
That is one area that I really liked that the last staff had in Yasir Rosemond. He had connections to Georgia, that Atlanta area. For those that don't know, I live in South Carolina, roughly 2 hours from Atlanta, but I will never go there because it's such a nightmare traffic wise. But that's a me problem. Um, there's a ton of talent in Georgia and a lot of talent in the South. It's not to say that IU can't get those guys.
yeah. It
There's
might just
no,
be starting on
yeah, yeah, yep, yeah.
a lower step than some other teams for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And that's kind of the one sort of barrier that I see this staff maybe not having is a natural connection somewhere in the South. But other than that, I think it's a really, really good group of both recruiting and off court, on court development stuff. Um, I think it's a good mix, and I do think that it's a group that should be able to connect with recruits in a pretty good way. We've already seen Indiana ramp up with. We're not going to get into high school recruiting right now, but
Another day, yeah.
a few prospects that are highly ranked that would be impact guys that IU would not have had a chance on
Yeah.
with the last regime. That Indiana's jumping in state and out of state. Guys like Jason Gardner Jr. Or in Ohio, Anthony Thompson. No relation to the running back, but a very good 2026 prospect that IU has already been. They've already seen him. They've been to visit him. They're making that effort to make connections where there wasn't with the previous regime, just because coaches knew the head coach there doesn't value a relationship here. He just doesn't. He's not interested in bringing in a high school player.
Yeah.
So they didn't pay attention to IU, and that's understandable. But that's stuff that they are working very quickly to fix, and that's good to see.
For sure. There's two other things that I want to get through, then we can wrap this up. But first thing, just how in general we think this roster kind of stands up in the Big Ten. So before this I just pulled, like, they don't have Big Ten odds at this point on DraftKings, right, but they did have the just national championships odds. It has Indiana at 6. If I was going through the Big Ten teams, it goes Purdue, Michigan, Michigan State, UCLA, Wisconsin, and then IU at 6. Followed by Iowa, USC, and then Oregon, Ohio State, Maryland in a little cluster there. But thoughts in general, there's lots of way too early projections out there that I was kind of going through. I mean, you can see Indiana as high as 4. You can see us at 14, and I think a lot of it is just because, as we've discussed over the past 45 minutes or so, this is an entirely new roster, an entirely new staff. There's nothing that is carrying over from this team, so there's very little to go off of other than you've seen players produce well at other places. Let's see if they can do it at IU. Where in general do you see this team stacking up?
Yeah, the rosters that I like better than IU's right now, and I the ones that I say yes, that's clearly a roster I like better than IU's. UCLA, Michigan, Purdue.
Yeah,
are the 3 rosters that I look at and say I like the group that they have better than the group that IU has. That doesn't mean that's how they're going to perform on the court. Who knows how that's going to shake out? But I feel comfortable saying I don't have IU in the top 3 in the Big Ten going into the season.
and year one, I think that's totally okay. I think we're
yeah.
Especially with an 18-team league, the hope is, I would say top 8-ish, make the tournament, and
there you go.
Yeah. Whatever you have to do to achieve that, I guess, in the Big Ten. But yeah, I really like the Michigan roster. USC's been getting some good commits recently too, so that roster I think is pretty quickly improving. Definitely felt like in the past maybe they weren't spending as much money, but seems like Muss is definitely nabbing some guys now. So that's a roster that I would add into that list. I don't know if I like it more, but there's definitely some flashy gets there that I think are kind of exciting. But yeah.
Yeah, I think Illinois is the one that
another kind of unknown.
Idea.
Yeah.
So many international guys that you could end up with a terrific team.
Yes.
I do think that there's some question marks with Purdue beyond their big 2, but when you have you have Kaufman Wren and Braden Smith returning, that's a heck of a starting point.
Yeah, it's a great start.
So I think that those 3, and then a cluster of Illinois as a shoulder shrug, Um, Iowa, I think will be pretty good. I have a lot of respect for Ben McCollum.
I am
Um,
so intrigued to watch Iowa.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
such a culture shock going from Fran to Ben, but
right.
I I loved McCollum. I liked him throughout this entire. I think we were in the same boat when we were talking coaching search stuff. So I think
Yeah,
you're in agreement with me. I think he was a very intriguing coaching prospect. I would have been perfectly happy if Indiana ended up hiring him. Um,
hmm
happy with where we ended up too, but Iowa's a team that I'm just going to be watching because I truly I enjoyed watching Drake this past year. I know a lot of people don't necessarily like that style of basketball. I was a Tony Bennett fan. I loved Kyle Guy back in the day. I was excited when Virginia won. So I, if you win and you score 63, that's totally fine with me. I think it's a very efficient style of basketball. I think it will be intriguing just because it's so much different than the Iowa that I've seen essentially my entire life.
they got a player that I really was hoping IU would show some interest in from Robert Morris, Alvaro Fulgaris, um, originally from Spain. Um, Once we start doing Big Ten preview stuff, I will be diving into the Iowa roster and trying to figure out how I think that's going to go.
Yeah,
Um, but that's an intriguing one. Illinois is an intriguing one. Maryland, um, yeah, that's another totally new roster. Michigan State, Wisconsin. I think that there's going to be a big jumble of teams. There's only a few schools that I look at and say, yeah, I've got some real question marks about how they're going to compete.
yeah.
Um,
I do
I
think it'll be a
don't.
pretty good Big Ten. So
I
that's
do.
I
Yeah, I
think
do.
it was a much weaker year this year for sure, but I think this is a Big Ten that at least on paper seems like it can compete. So
Yeah, yeah. There's some new blood in the coaching ranks, which I think is good. I think we are going to see a continued kind of DeVries is going to be a part of this continued push to make the Big Ten competitive in the NCAA tournament again, and that's going to take style of play. Um, I
yeah,
am a little sick of hearing the tackle basketball narrative. People that complain about the Big Ten being way too physical don't watch other conferences. I mean, there's some of those games in the SEC and the Big 12 are just bloodbaths.
yeah.
And
Bloodbath with wingspan.
yeah,
That's what I
yeah,
always notice, especially SEC basketball. I'm just like, oh my god, like
yeah,
you could play any sport.
yeah. And the way Houston plays, I mean, you're telling me that they're not physical. Like, okay,
Yeah,
sure, but I think that IU fits firmly right in the middle of that cluster, and where they finish among there is going to come down to a lot of close games. Um, and it's going to, I think, largely be determined by how well this group of players and this coaching staff can accentuate their strengths, which would be passing the ball, perimeter shooting, um, and versatility with with their perimeter players, and with Reed Bailey, a player like that can be a matchup problem for teams, given the way he can pass the ball and dribble at 6'10", versus how well they can limit their potential weakness on the interior.
yep,
That's going to be where what determines how Indiana finishes in that middle pack. So I do think a realistic goal is finish in the top half of the league, make the tournament, and show a foundation is being built as a program.
yeah.
Um,
And I think
I think
so
that
far
that's
we've
a
seen the
really good.
signs that I think
Yeah.
that's happening. So good to
Yep.
see. Last thing. So this is we'll just wrap it up with real quick. It's more just I was surprised by this news. Mike Woodson's still coaching. So he's headed to the Sacramento Kings, back to the NBA as one of their
Yeah.
assistant coaches. Um, were you as surprised by this as me? I
I
was
was.
confident he was headed to the golf course and
Yeah.
was going to be done. Um, especially after I'm sure he got a hefty buyout to exit stage right.
Yeah.
I was shocked to see him continuing in the coaching ranks.
Yes, I was very surprised. I know that he does have a lot of good relationships with NBA people. Um, so it's not a shock to me that he was able to get another assistant coaching job. Those are largely built on reputation and relationships. You see a ton of retreads, and I don't say that with the negative connotation. It's just if
It's
you
what
have NBA
happens. Yeah.
experience, they tend to lean towards, oh yeah, NBA experience. I know Mike. I coached with him at so and so.
Yep.
That's tends to be how it goes. Very surprised that he'd be interested in continuing to do it. So, hey, I hope he's happy. I hope he enjoys that. Never been to Sacramento, but it seems like a good fan base, and they've got a tough road to hoe in the Western Conference. But maybe
Yeah, for sure.
he can help get him over the hump.
That's a perfect place to end. We, first Indiana basketball pod for Hoosier Huddle, and we snuck in and over the hump. Love it. Anything else for final thoughts, or should we just wrap this up?
No, I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. We'll update on the board and on rivals. With any developing news, if IU actually announces the coaching staff officially at some point before the season, I have a coaching or kind of a coaching staff piece that I've been working on for a while. That's ready to go as soon as all that becomes official. Um, we'll also have a roster piece up there, and then we'll keep monitoring the Luke Goody and Anthony Leal stuff and the rest of the roster as it gets filled out. Um, we appreciate everybody listening and hope we can make this a regular thing that people enjoy. I know we'll try to do it, maybe once every couple weeks, and then as the season gets going, we'll try to have it as a regular weekly podcast that kind of talks about what's going on with the actual games. That'll be fun to do once we have concrete stuff to actually go over, as opposed to right now
Theoreticals.
everything's
Yeah.
hypothetical. So
Yep. Yeah, for sure. So follow us along. You can find us Hoosier Huddle on Rivals. Follow us on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Sign up for a membership. Thank you so much for listening.